Apologies, everyone. The make of my camera is a Sony DSC W290, which actually has a Carl Zeiss lens. But unfortunately, the camera was designed to only film in 29-minute segments each time. So that's why we're picking up here, and Mr. Parker was speaking about Evegenia Smetisko, aka Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov, allegedly, having taken the polygraph lie detector test.
With Grover Cleve Baxter, yes, exactly.
Yes.
And Grover Cleve Baxter was, of course, the father of the CIA polygraph lie detection unit. His protocols and his techniques are still used today and are still taught to polygraph analysts. So she was polygraphed by the father of polygraph lie detection, and he said she is Anastasia, she's not lying, as far as that component of her identity. Now I just wanted to add, according to the after the polygraph test, years pass by, I watch the History Channel and I see an interesting story about Jesse James, and I found that very interesting, so I sat there watching it. And Bob Schmidt, hello and thank you very much if you're watching today, was on the History Channel talking about Jesse James and a man whose family claimed was Jesse James, a nonagenarian who had not died and had not been buried where there was a grave saying Jesse James. He had faked his own demise and buried a neighbor's son in his wake, and then lived, changed the name a bit, and lived for a number of years more, well into his 90s. And so he used a new kind of technology then, visual face recognition technology, and took the young Jesse James, 20-something, took the 90-year-old, put them together, and it was the same face. They did do then, subsequently, a DNA test on the man in Jesse James' grave who had nothing to do with the James family at all. So I thought, well, if they can do this with Jesse James,
fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes, absolutely.
I said, why can't they do that with Anastasia Romanov? So I wrote to Evegenia Smetisko, I wrote to Bob wrote back, we began to work together. He started to do 2D analyses, and the faces were very congruent of the 62-year-old and of the then maybe 15-year-old Anastasia, the 62-year-old Evgenia. Amazing. And he said, John, there's going to be 3D technology very soon. Let's do it again with 3D. And when we did it with 3D, it was even more flabbergasting. So I ask you, Victoria, I ask you, Garrett, I ask all who are watching this today, wherever you are watching, would somebody who claims until her death to be someone, Evgenia claiming to be Anastasia, who actually matches the physical characteristics on her immigration papers. She seems to be short like Anastasia, blue-eyed, light brown, blondish hair, so she matches the physical characteristics, who then passes a lie detector test, who then is a 2D and 3D visual face recognition match, and who is then buried in a Russian Orthodox church with a changed birth date, which is now the birth date of Anastasia. What are we looking at?
Also, as we mentioned in our last interview, John, about the fact that she was still buried in a Russian Orthodox cemetery, regardless of the fact that she had become congregational, and you mentioned about her body having crossed state lines from Rhode Island to New York.
Right.
And that she would have had, by law, had to have been embalmed, and that the Russian Orthodox Church forbids embalming.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily forbids, but forbids cremation.
Yes.
Forbids cremation.
Uh,
All right.
Frowns upon.
Frowns upon. Apologies.
Embalming.
All right.
Yes.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Frowns upon it.
Yeah.
But what our question is, why would they make an allowance?
Yes.
Oh, well, I think also because
Very
the body crossed state lines,
Mhm.
and because her body was not immediately buried. It took some time. Her body was, quite honestly, in storage for a while before the final, maybe as long as a year. I'm not sure, but it was an extensive period of time before she was brought to the monastery to be buried. Of course, Anna Anderson was cremated, and that was always, before the DNA came out, I thought, I don't think any Orthodox woman would knowingly allow herself to be cremated, at least Russian Orthodox. And Evgenia was not, and her body should still be intact if there's no DNA stored away, which we have heard is extant, is available if the right channels are found, would be available through exhumation. And so I think we will get to the bottom of it eventually.
Yeah, and also that makes a great point too, because if she was buried in the monastery, Evegenia Smetisko, gave to the church that inheritance, her perpetuity.
Yes, as we also mentioned in the last interview.
And
Thank
if
you.
they say that she is an eccentric, why would she come across this big fortune to give to the church?
Victoria makes a good point in that the Foundation of Russian History Museum at the monastery receives a very sizable annuity in perpetuity from a trust fund that was set up upon her death, which will go to benefit the museum monastery, or the monastery museum rather, forever and ever. Besides that, she gave many wonderful Romanov objects to the museum, which you can see. And I have heard, and ask the audience to come up with their own understanding of what I will say, that Sidney Gibbs, the tutor, we know this historically, brought many Romanov objects out of Russia, things that he could get his hands on, things that had been given to him by the family. They were given to his adopted son, and I have heard from a pretty credible source that those objects which Sidney Gibbs had given to his adopted son were given by the adopted son to Evegenia Smetisko. Why would you give those objects to an imposter?
Yes, precisely.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a mystery
Perfect
all in
point.
itself. It's very, convoluted.
Convoluted.
Yes, it's so there has to be some real interesting mysteries behind it. Somebody knows the truth. Maybe many people know the truth, and they want to keep it secret.
Very possible. I also adhere to Occam's razor, the law of parsimony, that if something, it's easier to look at something and come to a logical conclusion by what is visible and logical, and if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And in this case, it looks like Evgenia and Anastasia. Evgenia / Anastasia looks like Alexandra. When I do a 2D and 3D analysis of the mother, Empress Alexandra, and the woman called Evegenia Smetisko, it's obviously a very close relative. The symmetry is breathtaking. The symmetry is breathtaking with Evgenia Smetisko / Anastasia, with who would have been her uncle, Ernst of Hesse. So all of these factors together make it much easier to say she must be Anastasia, she must not be an imposter, because there are too many factors that are obviously related to Anastasia, which are connected to Evegenia.
Absolutely.
And in all honesty and fairness, I believe everyone is at least entitled to, one way or another, whatever the result is, an answer.
Yes. Absolutely.
More than from a religious point of view or from historians' point of view. All of those are very, very important, but the family needs to know.
Yes.
Every family needs to understand what happened to their loved ones. So I think the very first responsibility is to the family. And
Well said, John. Well said. That's number one. That should be the case.
And if any of the Romanov family, close or distantly related, is watching, and I hope some whom I know will be watching, that is my prayer and my deepest wish, that before anyone else, you will have an answer, and that we can be thankful that there was a miracle in 1918, which may have taken 100 years to find out. And thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Victoria.
Absolutely.
And Ms. Veronica Forey for allowing us to use the Albert Newton Briggs manse in Queens, built in 1832. And you can't see the floorboards, but the floorboards that we're on right now were taken out of ships, boats that were used to transport ice from Queens to New York City by Mr. Briggs, who's a maternal relative of mine through genealogical coincidence. And it's a beauty to see these floorboards, which were repurposed before repurposing and recycling became trendy. And they're just beautiful to look at, and these boards have been back and forth between Queens and New York how many times?
Yes.
So
that just more and more fascinating. The story, the entire experience, the surroundings, Ms. Barbara Green's painting here, it's just
and we'll be back. We will
astounding, astounding. And just like last time, if everyone hears our bird friends downstairs, that's what the noise is. They're chiming in on the last half of this
an African gray.
portion of this interview.
They
African
need to
gray.
be heard. They want to be heard.
So thank you very much, and we look forward to being back with you again as more details of Anastasia Romanov, Evegenia Smetisko emerge, and I have the feeling they're going to be emerging more quickly now than ever. So stay tuned, and we look forward to being back.
I'm feeling it. I am feeling the vibes, and we do hope to have Ms. Green present for a future interview, and perhaps several more future interviews with yourself, John, and Victoria here, and we'll see where all of this leads.
And I'd like to say, if you are on Twitter, I am on Twitter, J. Froebel-Parker. Please send me a note if there's any questions you would like to ask about Evegenia Smetisko or of the artist Barbara Green. We'll be happy to incorporate those into our next video, and we're very happy for any constructive criticism or comments that you, we won't tolerate any kind of calumny, but surely anything that's positive and constructive, we're very happy to entertain and incorporate into what we bring to you. So thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank
most
you.
certainly. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you so
more
much.
than welcome.
Right.
All right. Our pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to our audience here
Thank you.
today.
Thank
And,
you.
Close-up of the painting.
And our audience, Linda, and the painting, I will close this interview out with, I'll move the camera towards Ms. Green's painting of Evegenia Smetisko, aka Anastasia Romanov, who will say, "Das Vidanya," bye for now too, and close here.